4 countries, 20 nations, several races, people and more. And all this, in the world of magic, a country of development, prosperous high technology, in the peaceful state of Rondel. The age of pure magic has passed. And now Rondel is a world of very advanced magical technology. This is called the era of magical progress. People and other creatures can teleport through portals without problems for life and health. However, despite advanced technology, Rodnadal was still a feudal country, ruled by kings and nobles. For the most part, humiliating those who are lower in status than them. Because of this, class inequality remained in force. Despite this, the era of magical progress was still called the Golden Age of Rondel. And also, December 22nd, 1990 according to the magical calendar, the day before the new century, Archmage Rondela announced his will and it turned the world upside down. In a live broadcast, he said that he hid all his heritage in different parts of this world. His speech was broadcast in various places in the empire so that it could be heard by everyone. His last words were that those who found these treasures would take his place. The great sorcerer shocked the world with his will. He was the founder of Rondel and had a hand in the formation of this world as a techno-magical civilization. He was also the Archduke of a growing empire. His name was the Supreme Sorcerer of the Ninth Circle, Manuel Lucas. In all of history, there were only 3 people like him, wizards of the Ninth Circle. He had no children, no successor. And his knowledge and power were great. All inheritances will be in the hands of the seeker, and whoever manages to find his destiny will receive everything. At the end of their speech, they were told that they could take the place of Archmage Lucas, and they must do so. So people began the pursuit of the fate of Archmage Lucas. And there was continuous news and speculation about this. Whether Lucas Dungeon is located in the Dragon Wasteland, or Lucas's treasure is hidden in the Alliance country of Alicia, a known offshore country, or Lucas Sky Fortress is located in a stormy sea, in the center of the world. Regardless of race or rank, the people went in search of the fate of Archmage Lucas. But rumors are rumors, despite the eternal disputes and discussions about where exactly fate is. No one has been able to find the fate of the Archmage. Many people investigated, but never found any clue that could lead them to the fate of the Archmage. So 20 years passed. The lonely figure of a guy stood near a huge gate surrounded by dozens of screens. Sweat dripped down his face. One of the screens lit up with a notification that he had achieved the fate of Manuel Lucas. The face of the guy in whose hands this screen appeared lit up with a bright smile. Finally, it was he who received the fate of the Archmage. The clean and well-groomed grounds of the Lawrence estate were illuminated by the bright summer sun. It was 2007 according to the magical calendar. The corridors decorated with gold frames were also illuminated by the bright sun. One of the people asked young Mr. Adrian if he was going to the office again. Adrian, carrying the books, replied that he was right, and he wanted to put back the books he had already read. The butler thoughtfully said that he could tell them, and they would do it instead of him. However, the boy replied that he wanted to find another book, so they should not worry. Everyone was immediately touched by the behavior of Viscount Lawrence's second son, Adrian Lawrence. He was reborn in the body of Adrian Lawrence, and at the same time remembers his past life. But the end of his past life was very boring. He served in the army and had only a month left before demobilization, but he died in an accident. The truck he was riding in overturned, and when he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the Republic of South Korea, but in the Kingdom of Raingard. He was no longer Kim Min-gi, but Adrian Lawrence. Before this, he lived in a middle-class family. And now he became the second son of a wealthy viscount, and lived on the estate. At first he was very surprised and alarmed. But then he realized that his past experiences could greatly help him in this new life. Many people told him that he was very talented. While his peers were captivated by games and other children's rubbish, he greedily strived for knowledge. And his father said that it was the first time they had seen a child with such a bright head. Adrian always sincerely thanked for compliments and praise. He exceeded the expectations of those around him and his father. However, not everything was so rosy. Rondel was a civilization more technologically advanced than humanity in the 21st century. Therefore, his knowledge of human science did not help him. and he always sat for a long time in the library reading books. In this situation, he is simply obliged to improve his skills and continue to behave as if he is a genius. Despite the desire to sleep, with these thoughts he yawned, covering his mouth. The boy continued to sit reading books in the library, staying late. But one day something happened that made him doubt whether this life is as easy as it seems at first glance. The boy fell unconscious to the floor, and the servants and mother immediately ran up to him with loud screams. When he was 7 years old, they tried to poison him for the first time. He could do nothing but spit and cough up blood, and did not pay attention to the people fussing around him and shouting to call a doctor. The doctor told one of the maids that he was very lucky. If they had been a few minutes late, he would have been dead. But the maid could not understand who could have done this, and she asked out loud in surprise. But I didn't receive an answer. But for Adrian lying in bed, it seemed that the culprit was obvious to everyone. Hearing a man approach the bed and say in an exaggeratedly sweet voice that he couldn't imagine how scared she was for him, Adrian opened his eyes in fear, staring at Viscount Lawrence's first wife, and Lawrence, who, piercing him with a hard gaze, darkly asked how he was feeling. To the high noblewoman, he, the son of a commoner, was a bone in the throat, especially because his father loved him more than her son. With a loud cry of curse, he hit the wall with force. And then, holding his head, he thought, so what if this world has moved far ahead technically? The government system there is terribly backward. He cannot expose Anna without evidence. Why then his father will not do anything is not clear. But it couldn't be that he didn't suspect her. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him, causing him to immediately freeze in place. All this meant that he was simply turning a blind eye to it. It was then and for this reason that he stopped pretending to be a young talent. About 10 years have passed since then. It was the 1st of May, 2019 according to the magical calendar. The cashiers bowed slightly and greeted the guy who entered the virtual reality capsule store. He was Adrian Lawrence, who at that time was already 20 years old. The cashier guy, who didn't recognize the person who came in, asked his partner if she knew him and if he was some kind of celebrity. His partner told him to be quiet, and looking at the guy who came up to the shelf, she said that he was the second son of Viscount Lawrence. The cashier guy said in surprise that if he is Lawrence, then he is one of the owners of these lands. Why then is he dressed like a simple man? His partner covered his mouth when the client's voice was heard calling them. And she replied that of course, asking how she could help. The guy walked up to the cashiers and said he couldn't find the Chronicle Points cards online. The girl said they were at the checkout, because they have new instructions to sell cards only at the checkout. And then she asked how much he would take. With a friendly smile, the guy confidently replied that he would take everything. The cashiers calculated his purchase and thanked him for it. And when he left, the girl angrily hit her partner, asking when he would finally pull himself together. And he doesn't know that there is a punishment for insulting a nobleman. He apologized and asked why he didn't send a servant to the store. He shouldn't have to do this on his own. Looking at the guy who was approached by the soldiers, she asked in response how she knew. To be honest, she was also very scared when she first saw him. Also looking out the window, the guy asked how often he comes. The girl replied that 2 or 3 times a month. As he himself sees, the gentleman is very interested in online games. Adrian opened the package and looked inside, thinking that there was 5 million worth of loot inside the game currency. And in Korean won it would also be about 5 million. Suddenly, one of the arriving soldiers called him, and he said that they were informed that young Master Cedric had come to his house. The guy frowned at these words. After some time, he arrived home, where he was met by his worried mother, Sylvia Lawrence. He replied that he had indeed come and hugged his mother, asking where his brother was, which immediately appeared nearby, and calling him by name, in a loud voice he asked if he was really wandering around the city again on foot, without a car. And in general, is he in his right mind? Even though he was Adrian's half-brother, they were not alike at all. Adrian, with his mother standing behind him, remained silent in response, thinking to himself that he had already gotten him. Meanwhile, his brother continued, telling him that he was the son of a nobleman, so maybe for once he would think about his family's reputation. The guy again didn't answer, thinking to himself that it was funny that the one who openly hangs around with girls is telling him about the family's reputation. If he weren't a nobleman, he wouldn't even be able to take care of himself. But it's better not to contradict, otherwise this concert will only drag on. So he bowed his head a little and apologized that he had been careless and that it would not happen again. The guy looked at him arrogantly and said that it was true. A half-breed commoner has no need to be proud. They stood in the courtyard surrounded by soldiers. Adrian changed the topic and asked his brother why he came. Clearing his throat, he replied that his father wanted him to take control of one business. It's a farce of distribution, and he's probably heard about it. Adrian said nothing, standing with a bored face. Of course he guessed about it. According to earthly concepts, the nobles of Rondel are both oligarchs and statesmen. Naturally they own a business. Fars Distributions is a mining company. One of those owned by the Lawrence family. Well, now he understands why Cedric broke in there. Still, he is a greedy and incompetent guy. Exhaling, he said with an innocent smile that he understood and did not pretend to anything. His brother replied that he was glad that he figured it out so quickly. Without paying him any more attention, Adrian said that if that's all, then let him leave. And he shook the loot in front of his surprised eyes, saying that he had bought a lot of loot. However, his brother only laughed loudly and mockingly in response. And passing by, he put his hand on his shoulder with the words that he should do this. As he walked away, his mother approached Adrian and asked if he was sure that he should have refused. He replied that he would definitely. Looking out of the corner of his eye after the people leaving, he said that it was better not to interfere. He entered the house and walked past the butler who greeted him, immediately warning him that he was going to play. And asks to disturb only if something is very important. He stopped striving to study, and moved away from everyone, including his own servants. Probably his father did not need the son of a commoner, who was not a genius. And he lost interest in him. Thanks to this, he never again found himself in life-threatening situations. For 10 years he lived as an invisible shadow. He opened the door, thinking that this was precisely why he graduated from the academy and left the estate. The servants whispered about him, asking each other if he was the very son of the nobleman who was once considered a genius. It was believed that he became like this due to poisoning. They said that he groveled before Mr. Cedric, and did not dare say a word against him. He lives in his game. He expelled himself from the family. The guy knew that most of the servants in their new house were henchmen of his eldest wife Anna. Even at home he has to think about what he's saying out loud. It's tiring. Adrian entered the room and locked the door behind him. And then he slowly approached the table and he took virtual reality glasses from him, immediately putting them on yourself, with thoughts about whether to really play online games is an escape from reality. A notification about logging into Chronicle Online immediately appeared in front of his eyes that he smiled mockingly, deciding for himself that all this was a lie. A second notification appeared saying that he had cleared the first level of the Destiny quest, and then it showed the character loading. Synchronizing a character with his body, the guy smugly asked into the void that why, if they want to conduct total surveillance of him, they don't follow him in the virtual world. The following notice notified that the abilities acquired in the online chronicle are reflected in reality. 10 years ago, he entered the Royal Academy. He was writing an essay for Manuel Lucas. And I found something completely unexpected. Lucas's family tree, whatever one may say, it was impossible to interpret in any way other than the English word why. It was surprising, after all, how he could know English. Is Manuel Lucas also from another dimension? This guess was so crazy and shocking that I couldn't even believe it. He read about it in the library when he was little. Although, he didn't have enough evidence. Maybe it's just a coincidence. However, it soon became obvious to him that the Archduke was an Earthling. His last words were that he would so much like to walk along the California beach with Mary again. The guy didn't understand what place he was talking about. He had never heard of the California beach, but he did not omit it in his biography, because everything that this wonderful man said is important. So the last words of the Archduke are recorded as is. This is what was written in the biography of the Archduke compiled by his butler. Of course, this couldn't be just a coincidence. The great Archmage was definitely an Earthling, just like himself. He continued his investigation and found more and more irrefutable evidence that he was indeed from the human world. Like a prototype or a concentrator called Washington, or the first virtual reality system that connects the physical body to a simulation in a dream state, whose name is Hollywood. The fact that he was from the world of people was very useful to him in the task of finding the destiny that Manuel left to his descendants, that he looked for her while he was a child, and already as an adult, without giving up and leaving the hope that he will find her. And in the end, I found and received it, which made me incredibly happy, hoping that now for the rest of my life I will ride like cheese in butter. At that moment, something painfully cut his shoulder, causing him to close his eyes. Looking behind himself in an attempt to understand what it was, he was surprised to notice that he was apparently overjoyed early, and he turned back, and the axe that hit him and then flew past, thrown by the goblin standing in front of him, forcefully stuck into the wall. Adrian, holding his sword at the ready, shouted that it hurt. And he's a freak. As soon as he reached the fate of the Archmage, the true suffering began. The guy tensely said out loud that he didn't know whether he should get involved with this. And then I thought about it. The fate of Manuel Lucas was hidden in an unexpected place. In an online game, in the virtual world. This world is outwardly indistinguishable from reality, but it is, nevertheless, a game. There should be no feeling of pain in it, but he feels this pain, and every fight costs him dearly. What no one knew was that upon receiving the fate of the Archmage, a person moves his body into the game reality. If you tell anyone, they won't believe you. The goblin, whose head had a health bar, roared loudly, looking at him with a bloodthirsty gaze, and then he quickly rushed towards the guy standing in a defensive stance. He immediately parried the blow with his sword, and then he struck right through this goblin, who did not have time to do anything in response. A sign immediately appeared indicating a critical hit. His level has increased. Notifications poured in that he had reached level 10, and now he could change his occupation. He cleared the first level of the Destiny quest. Then a notification came that the chief god Ariel had moved him to a secret place. A white-tiled floor immediately appeared under his feet. Notifications about loading a character and synchronizing the character with his physical body have reappeared. A sign appeared in front of his head notifying him that all his abilities in the online chronicle were affecting reality. He immediately thought that this was complete nonsense. Synchronization, of course, would not make itself felt in reality for a long time. Turning around, he was surprised to see a door in front of him. A sign immediately appeared in front of him asking if he wanted to go up to the second floor of Manuel Lucas's magic tower. The guy immediately answered of course, and opened the door and walked in. To get into a huge, ornate office with bookcases on each side, and a large chest in the middle, the conclusion was obvious. This was his office. He thought about it. There was nothing on the first floor, but it was different there. Thousands of books on shelves, and also a chest, above which there was a glowing inscription that it was a treasure chest. Another notification has arrived, where it was said that he received 5 trillion. And he needs to enter an account to receive the amount. The guy looked at the open chest and noticed that finally there was something really useful and similar to a reward. The only pity was that it couldn't be converted into real money. Suddenly, a bright light began to emanate from this chest, and notifications came that the first circle had appeared. Thanks to this first circle, he gets the job of a magician. The circle will be created on his synchronized physical body. The guy looked at the circle hovering above his hands and joyfully said that it was this, and not money, that was the true value. The next notice warned him not to leave the game, otherwise his physical body would be damaged. Adrian closed his eyes and thought. Before this, he had seen health points and mana points, and did not perceive them as something unusual, but it was a completely different matter to feel magical energy in real life. When the notification came that the download was complete and that the circle had been successfully created, he opened his eyes with a smile and put his hand to his chest. Now, he clearly felt the mana swirling in his chest. It wasn't easy, but here it is, the power of the Archmage's destiny, to connect the game character, in terms of abilities and so on, with his physical body in reality. Adrin approached the shelf, thinking that since the first circle had been created, why not learn the spells that correspond to it? He is sure that Lucas bequeathed these books to the one who will find his destiny, but as soon as he reached out to the books, a sign appeared that asked what book he would like to find. Adrian thought it was very convenient. There were simply tons of books there. He didn't know how many years he would be able to read everything. But this is exactly what the library of the best magician of humanity should be. After a while, he weakly bent in half and leaned on a shelf with books, trying to catch his breath. Adrian covered his mouth with one hand, and in his head there was only the thought of how bad his head hurt. He thought about how convenient it is in games to read books with one click, instantly downloading their content. Only he personally feels faint and pain from this process of recording information in his brain. And then he took another book from the shelf, promising himself that this would definitely be the last. The notice immediately revealed that it was a book about the concealment of the circle. She teaches you to hide the presence of a circle and the amount of mana. Does not work against knights of the master level, and magicians from the 7th circle and above, as well as against search artifacts of the highest levels. The guy thought that he needed this skill most of all, as if they knew in what circumstances he lives. Therefore, as soon as a window appeared asking if he wanted to read a book about the concealment of the circle, he said read it. However, his face immediately contorted in pain due to the huge amount of information simultaneously entering his head. Adrian laughed and began to fall helplessly to the side, and then he completely fell to the floor with a huge thud. Already lying on the floor, he tiredly said that this was only a microscopic step. And he still has so much to do. He never expected to reach the level of Manuel Lucas. He just wanted to live with his mother in prosperity and security. For this, he is ready to do anything. The next day, he came to train at the training ground of the estate, where, besides him, people were training. A confidant and knight of the personal guard, Weiss, sincerely said with a smile that Adrian was more resilient than he thought. Adrian asked if he really thought so. The knight nodded in response, and handed him a towel, saying that, to be honest, he was surprised when he wanted to practice with a sword. The guy replied that it was because he felt a little out of shape, which is why he decided to work out. He thought to himself that, to be honest, he was doing this for the game. After all, training in reality will also affect the character. He realized that he needed to improve his fighting skills when he experienced a real fight in his own skin. But he feels his magic developing and his stamina growing. It seems like the level up was immediately reflected in the real world. Thus, we can conclude that he can use his skills outside the game, with thoughts that, fortunately, he solved the problem of hiding the circle, and learned a spell that would not allow the knights to recognize the presence of mana. Because knights have such an ability, Adrian smiled. The knight who noticed his smile also smiled, and then he asked if anything good had happened in his life. The guy immediately, with an awkward expression on his face, wondered if it was all written all over his face. Turning in his direction, he said with a smile that he simply received a good reward in the game. People around them began to whisper that of course. He's an addict. Weiss was also strange to them. Why is he so friendly with this insignificant person? And what is he trying to achieve? The knight standing behind Adrian became angry when he heard them. However, Adrian waved his hand at him and told him to just ignore him. He said goodbye and left the bowing knight, saying that he would go and play. He was pleased that he was worried about him, but he didn't know that Adrian was only pretending to be harmless. He needs to look like this to survive, so that Cedric and his mother Anna do not see him as a threat. The best thing to do now is to appear like a soft-headed fool. Game login notifications have reappeared. And welcome him to the online chronicle. The guy reappeared in the office with books. He immediately said that he was convinced that his stats were really reflected in reality. And now, in order to get to even greater amounts of gold and abilities, he needs to squander everything he has. After finishing speaking, he immediately opened the download of the catalog of goods for purchase. As someone wise said, the most important thing in online games is a fat wallet. He immediately bought experience points, the blessing of the goddess and the protection of the goddess. and then he said that he would have needed all this earlier. However, the catalog was not available to him until he reached level 10. And here is the highlight of the program, the ability to purchase and summon a companion. He has, to put it mildly, lousy fighting skills, so if he has someone who will aggro all his enemies, it will help him. He thought again, putting his finger to his chin. The companion, of course, will take away the experience that he could gain by fighting himself. But still, this is not a waste of money. Therefore, he will choose the best companion to tank for him, no matter how much it costs him. A window immediately appeared asking if he wanted to summon a companion. He clicked on yes, and thinking that he had the money and determination, he began to select. Questionnaires immediately poured in, but he missed most of them, due to the fact that most of them were low-class companions who did not know magic, with a small amount of health and physical attack. Leafing through these profiles, he thought that their choice was like in the shitty online games that they make mainly in Korea. And he said that he had invested 30 million won, but could not find a companion to his liking. The choice is simply terrible. He looked in surprise at the next banner that appeared. The name of the companion was written on it, and the fact that this companion is a shield bearer, wears the shield of God. The guy saw this for the first time, and he didn't know whether it was new, or he simply didn't notice it. Having looked at her performance, Adrian decided that, in addition, she is an excellent option also because she is at her level, even among unique companions. Therefore, as soon as a window appeared asking if he wanted to take the Celestial Steel as a companion, he agreed. Another window appeared with a warning that the companion was being taken once and for all, and at the end the question was left as to whether he really wanted to take this character as a companion. The guy stood up and immediately became indignant, asking that is it usually possible to change a companion at any time, but this is not the case this time. The system succinctly replied that this works with all characters except tanks. He is an exception. Adrian put his hand to his head and thought. It was like a constraint that was attached to an event. And to be honest, he thinks that, being a wizard, he will not need any other companion. Having heard that he agreed, the program began loading the character and registering the companion. The guy closed his eyes from the bright light emanating from this process, wondering to himself if there had been such bright effects before. In front of him, from this light, the silhouette of a tall girl gradually began to appear. When the girl with the shield appeared completely, the program notified the guy that this was Arceus Skysteel. Looking at her blank expression, Adrian said that she had such an expression on her face, as if she were some kind of golem, only with the appearance of a person. However, she was very beautiful. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The guy invited her to go practice, and they went into the forest together. The girl standing in front of the guy covered him with her shield and repelled the attacks of the attackers. Meanwhile, Adrian, calmly and without worrying about anything, fired magic arrows at the attacking golems. Suddenly, he looked in surprise at something that appeared ahead. His game map showed that he had already reached level 20. The hunt was successful because he had a tank with him. Adrian sat down under a tree and looked thoughtfully at the girl, thinking. Even if he loses in experience, he does not feel that it is anything significant. Although, the further you go, the more experience your companion will need. Maybe in real life it will be much easier to practice magic, who knows? Suddenly, signs appeared before his eyes stating that he had already spent 15 hours in the game, and he needed to go out and rest in order to continue later. Therefore, he immediately gave the command to leave, immediately gradually moving into his physical body. Not immediately noticing another silhouette in the room, he stretched and sat down on the bed, saying what a productive day today was, and that he would rest a little and go to the site. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a silhouette standing in the dark part of the room, from which he quickly turned back, shocked to recognize his companion and tank in the man standing behind. Having calmed down, he calmly clarified that it was she. The girl, in turn, said nothing, continuing to silently glare at him. Adrian got out of bed and cautiously walked towards the girl standing opposite him with a shield, asking who she was. The girl immediately replied that she was his companion, but Adrian interrupted her, saying that he knew that, and that he meant something else. Coming closer, he snapped his fingers and said that he meant how exactly she could leave the game with him. The girl answered colorlessly that she understood that he wanted to know how she could materialize in their world. Adrian replied that it was so, and thought that it seemed like she understood everything perfectly well, since she could distinguish the game from reality. The girl, meanwhile, explained that she was a homunculus, and in other words, an android. It was created by Archduke Manuel Lucas. He created Arcia Skysteel with the characteristics and appearance that suited him. The guy asked if that meant she was part of his heritage. The girl quickly confirmed his words. He covered his face with his hand. If he had known that this would happen, he would have found another companion. He's not being picky, but he could have been warned. Deciding not to dwell too much on this, Adrian asked if her statistics were the same in this world. The girl said yes, they are the same. But some of them are closed and will only be opened when its level increases. If you bring all her statistics to the maximum, then she will be equal in strength to a Grand Master. What she said completely shocked the guy. If she can really reach Grand Master, then according to the level of knights, these are the 8th and 9th levels. And according to the level of magicians, the 8th circle. In fact, she can compete with the strongest of this world. In Reingard itself, the most powerful magician is only of the 8th circle, and in the world of magicians of the 8th circle there are only 8 people. Whether Manuel Lucas really created a monster of this level, he did not know. However, it will be very good to have such a faithful, strong and dutiful companion. Only he doesn't know where he will take her in this world, so he asked the girl where she had been before she moved there, and how to move it back into the game. The girl replied that she was sleeping in a repair shop in the holy city of Everhill. Then she was moved there by a system of unexpected encounters. Return travel is only possible at the same time at which she was sent there. If she needs to, she will go to the workshop herself. After listening to her, Adrian asked if she had a stealth function. The girl said that since she belongs to the warrior class, she definitely has no secrecy. But hiding mana is possible. The guy told her to do it in that case. She immediately complied, starting the process of concealing the mana. The guy watching her thought that the protective field around her armor had disappeared, and so had the mana. It's very good that she can do things like him, otherwise the knights would recognize her very easily. But what to do next? He walked away from the girl with the words that it was even worse. She didn't understand anything, but continued to watch him carefully and look questioningly. Adrian leaned against the wall with a smile and said that in this case, he would simply ruin his reputation. Some time passed and rumors spread in the palace. People were discussing that some girl was always visiting Mr. Adrian. They were not ashamed to gossip in front of them that someone had heard that the servants had long ago found them in his room, and that was not all. They were now together all the time. However, neither the guy nor the girl reacted in any way to such speculation and rumors. He remembered how his mother asked him when they would get married and said that it was okay, even if she was a commoner. And the knight was even a little shocked by what was happening. Adrian stared in shock at the sign that said that he had already reached level 30. A new quest opened up for him, called Unexpected Encounters. One of the conditions was to reach level 30, and the second was to defeat an orc warrior. As a reward, the 3rd floor of Manuel Lucas's magic tower was opened. The guy read and looked at all the notifications, and thought that this was, in any case, very good. He will pretend that he is an immature and stupid young nobleman who brought a strange woman into the house. And then no one will guess who Arcia really is. Although, his mother is already ready to marry them. He turned to the girl standing behind him and asked what happens to her body there when she is in the game. Arcia replied that it switches to eco mode and from the outside it looks like she is sleeping. However, for his safety, she will always have an alert system turned on, which will notify if something is wrong. Adrian asked that in this case, it turns out that if something bad happens in reality, he will immediately react and call him. The girl replied that he was right and turned in the other direction. There, behind them, black smoke appeared and the floor began to shake. And then, surrounded by this black haze, a huge, black, inhuman leg appeared. Finally, a huge full-length goblin appeared in front of the girl and guy, and the system announced the beginning of the second-level destiny quest, defeating the orc warrior Cants. This goblin growled at the man in a dark voice, saying that if he killed him, he would increase his level. At this moment, a notification appeared warning that in this battle, the use of one-time attacks such as bombs, etc. is prohibited. The guy thought about it. One-time attacks were exactly what helped him out in fights. Apparently Manuel Lucas really wants his heir to be strong. And it looks like defeating the goblin will be very difficult. He called the girl, and she immediately replied that she understood what he wanted. With the words of wishing death to the little people, the goblin swung to strike. The girl immediately put up a shield for protection. His blow hit him directly with a loud sound, without making a single scratch on either those standing in front of him or the shield itself. From the force of the recoil, the goblin stepped back a little. And he looked in shock at the people in front of him, to whom he could not do anything. Adrian, standing behind the girl, had already collected mana in his hand and was aiming this magic arrow right at the goblin's head. A magic arrow to the most vulnerable spot, the goblin's left eye, which was unprotected. The system immediately notified of a critical hit. The goblin's health, which was now bleeding from its eye, had dropped from 5,500 to 4,300. And he temporarily lost the ability to stand upright, howling loudly in pain. The guy standing behind the girl immediately thought that, in general, he had a great crit. Due to the fact that he is wearing all kinds of magic-enhancing artifacts and robes, his spells are many times stronger than they are on the first circle. The joyful thought even occurred to him that if this monster was of his level, then now he could easily one-shot him. But his thought was interrupted by a powerful blow from the goblin's huge sword, which Arcia again repelled with her shield. Not paying attention to Adrian, who was frightened and covering his face with his hands, he looked at the tip of the sword next to his neck, thinking that he might go crazy. Despite the huge amount of health points, it is obvious that the orc standing in front of him is seriously injured. Well, he's a big guy, of course. The orc in front of them came closer and began to strike randomly with his sword directly at Arcia's shield, behind whom Adrian was still standing. Watching the chaos that was happening, Adrian thought that it was very good that Arcia was with him. Without her he would have died from one blow. He would be lying if he said that an attack from such an enemy did not frighten him. After all, he was already dying. Having finally decided something with tactics, he fired another, this time different spell towards the orc. He was surprised and suddenly began to fall into a hole that appeared in the ground under his feet. The goblin fell heavily to the floor in front of them. The guy thought that at this level, he should not allow fear to overcome him. Shouting to Arcia not to let him get up, he said that he would cast at him. She rushed to the orc, saying only a laconic word. She held the goblin so that he could not move or do anything, and Adrian dealt damage. Little by little, one spell turned into several, and they systematically caused damage to the goblin. When his health bar was almost empty, he was finally able to stand up and head towards the guy who was causing him damage. Adrian, near whom Arcia stood with a shield, folded his arms on his chest, looking at this and said that he was very stubborn. His words angered the goblin even more and he growled even louder. The guy continued and said that it would be better if he put down his sword and went at them hand to hand. It would be more helpful. But the goblin still rushed at them, swinging his sword. In response, Adrian shot a fatal magic arrow between his eyes, after which notifications began to pour in that he had defeated the orc warrior Cants. He cleared the second level of the Destiny quest and opened the next floor of the Magic Tower. The third floor of Manuel Lucas' Magic Tower has been opened. At the same time, in the office of Viscount Lawrence, Viscount Lawrence, lost in thought, stood silently at the window, folding his shrine over his chest and not paying attention to what was happening in the room where he was. His wife entered the room, to whom he turned, hearing footsteps, and asked him what he was thinking about. Viscount Rayford Lawrence turned fully to the newcomer, without answering her. She, in turn, noticed that he was all alone there. Coming closer to him, she asked if he was worried about Adrian, and because he brought a commoner to the estate. A woman approached and looked into the Viscount's eyes and asked if this was so. This was the first wife of Viscount Lawrence. The Viscount, without further ado, silently took out and handed her a printed envelope. When she opened it, she was shocked to read the message, which said that this was a notification about the start of the conscription campaign. Since the war with the Kreutzen Empire still had not passed them by, the overlord commanded the nobles to come with the army to the training camp. Viscount Lawrence is to report to the command of the western group of troops with 5,000 troops, 50 knights, and 1,000 infantry soldiers. Anna put the letter aside and demanded to know if he was going to send Cedric to war. The Viscount remained silent, still looking out the window. Instead, she suggested that he send Adrian to war. In her opinion, the main argument was that he was still good for nothing except playing with toys all day. And maybe this way he will justify his right to be called Lawrence. The Viscount looked at her sternly at the mention of Adrian. Then he turned back to the window, and reminding Anna that she had not even thought about him all this time, asked if she now really wanted Adrian to just give up his life. She replied that Adrian himself wanted it that way until that time and moment he had enjoyed a carefree life. The Viscount asked in disbelief if she really thought so. To which Anna responded by asking what he meant. The Viscount looked into her eyes, but did not answer, causing an awkward pause between them. A moment later he said that Cedric is the heir to his empire, and he will provide her and her father-in-law with everything they need, so he asks her to accept his decision with humility. Anna silently looked at him, barely restraining the boiling anger that was already ready to burst out. The Viscount turned to the window and, no longer paying attention to her, continued, saying that he would send Adrian as she asked. However, upon his return, he will gain complete independence. Adrian will no longer be and should not be in any danger. No more spying and no more substituting servants. He finished saying that he hoped it was fair enough. She should stop and finally give Adrian freedom. The next day, Adrian came to the training ground again with his companion, and began to train in the company of her and the knight. He practiced punches and thrusts with the two-handed knight's sword as long as he had any strength left. When he stopped to rest, a knight approached him and praised him, saying that in recent days, he had become very strong thanks to these trainings. He also said with admiration that it was simply incredible how strong he had become. If only he had studied since childhood, he would probably have become such a master as the world has never seen. The guy thought to himself that of course he was leveling up, and even remembered the victory over the orc, thanks to which he had already reached level 30 and completed the second quest of fate. He especially liked the reward for the quest. He received a bunch of gold and a second circle of magic. I even got hidden storage. It is somewhat similar to the inventory in the game, an invisible space in which he can store things. It can be used not only for personal equipment. He clenched his fist and looked at it, still thinking. Statistics in the game are reflected in reality. Therefore, he can become a magician, while still having the physical strength of a knight. If he fully masters Lucas's entire legacy, he could become even greater than him. When he told his companions that he had already rested and was about to offer to continue, another knight approached them from the side and called him. Having told Adrian, who turned to him in surprise, that his father was calling him to him. Here are my victim. 5 days later, he arrived at the Lawrence estate, and was already standing in his office opposite the Viscount. Cedric raged, not looking at the calm Adrian standing behind him. He shouted indignantly about how this weakling could even represent their family in the war. Adrian, meanwhile, thought with irony that he was still wondering why he was calling him. The Viscount replied to Cedric that he was the only heir to the estate, and he could not risk it. Hearing this, Adrian's mother intervened, excitedly asking if Adrian could be risked then. The Viscount replied that he was still an heir, more valuable than any other children. Adrian said nothing, thinking that if he really called him just to say this, then he was angry, but this was not as bad as it might seem at first glance. Let's say he can take virtual reality glasses with him, and no one will bother him to play due to his position. But most importantly, when he leaves, he will be able to actually get out from under Anna's supervision. Therefore, having finished thinking, he immediately said that he understood his father. He agrees to go to war and be the representative of their family. The Viscount immediately thanked him for his choice and decision. Then his brother turned to him and angrily said that he respected his father's decision, but let him know that if he disgraced his family at the front, he would not leave it like that. Adrian thought it was funny. He says all this to his brother, who goes to fight in his place. In terms of age, he seems to be mature, but in terms of character, he is not. Although it looks like he was simply spoiled. However, he did not tell him this. Instead, he leaned slightly in his direction and said that he would try to do everything in his power. The Viscount stood up from his chair and called Adrian, telling him not to go anywhere and to stay because he needed to talk to him. After some time, evening had already come. The Viscount and Adrian went outside to a huge balcony. Adrian noticed that he even sent the guards, which means he wants to say something without witnesses. So he turned to the Viscount, who had his back turned to him, asking what he wanted to tell him. Without turning around, he said that if he returned safely, he would move him and Sylvia to the royal lands. Ignoring his son's surprise, he continued, saying that this would be payment for going instead of Cedric. He will enjoy complete freedom. The guy thought to himself that Anna would never allow him to be not under her control. How could she even agree? But still, he can't trust his father yet. So he bowed his head to the turning Viscount, said that he understood him, and he still needed to think. The Viscount replied that he understood, and that he still did not trust him either. Adrian said that he still first needed to return alive from the front. The Viscount said that everything was correct, and exhaling, he reached for the inner pocket of his jacket. Having taken something out of it, he said that it was for him, and handed it to the surprised guy, who accepted what he gave and asked what it was. The Viscount explained to Adrian, who was holding the rings in his hand, that these were protective field rings, grade 5 and grade 7. On the battlefield, teleportation is impossible, so that's all he can do for him. But the guy didn't really listen to him, thinking that these artifacts were very valuable. Therefore, he thanked the Viscount for them, and he, in turn, told him to always remain on the alert. Hearing some sounds, he turned to the window, immediately noticing Anna and her son there, who all this time, without hiding, were watching them, emitting a gloomy aura. Adrian immediately realized that of course they were peeping. These idiots had no conscience at all. In his thoughts, he did not even notice how the Viscount came closer to him. Following his gaze, he said that he would take care of Sylvia, and Adrian needed to take care of himself. Adrian thought about it. When they wanted to poison him at the age of 7, his reaction was a blow to him. And then he disappointed him many times. But there are only enemies around and the only one he can trust is his father. Therefore, he quickly promised that he would definitely return, and he told the surprised Viscount that he should trust him. He belatedly thanked him for his trust. When it became completely dark, only the Viscount remained in the office, as always, immersed in his own thoughts. Suddenly, a terrible headache shot through his head, from which he closed his eyes and immediately grabbed it. And then he activated the ring on his finger, which is responsible for reducing pain. The green light emanating from the ring enveloped his body, completely healing him. When it stopped, the Viscount got up from the sofa, and, holding his still aching head, went to the exit. Along the way, thinking about Adrian. He knew that since he was poisoned, he had been acting this way on purpose. Meanwhile, in the place where Adrian lived with his mother there was grief. Adrian tried to calm his crying mother, asking her not to be afraid or worry about him. She knows that he can stand up for himself. His mother agreed with this, but asked what would happen if Anna sent assassins to the front. To her surprise, the guy replied that it was even better. Let them commit more crimes, and it will be easier to eliminate them in the future. His words even stopped his mother from crying. Asking what he is talking about in case someone hears them, Adrian calmed her down and told her not to be afraid, because Arcia was standing guard at the door. Despite all the objections of the surprised mother, Perrin said that he would no longer tolerate such an attitude, and will put an end to all this. She just needs to wait a little. The smile did not leave his face while he said all this. 2 days later, the gathering of Lawrence's troops had already begun. Servant Hahnemann, wiping the sweat from his face with a handkerchief, carefully asked who the young master's companion was. He calmly asked in response that he didn't know Arcia, and as if to give weight to his words, he pointed at her with his hand. The servant replied that he heard that she was his lady love. But they are going to war, and if he were him, he would not take his mistress there. The levitation train stood alone in a clearing in the forest. In the conference room inside the train, a guy and his subordinates were sitting around a semicircular table. Adrian said that the matter was closed and they could consider her to be his secretary. They said that if he insists, then they understand everything. He glanced at Arcia out of the corner of his eye, thinking that he couldn't leave her at home anyway. After all, she is ready to protect him to the last drop of blood. Moreover, recently she has improved very much, and is very close in level to the highest knighthood. He needed to seriously prepare to protect himself. Adrian lost 200 million gold in 2 days. I bought top equipment and completed the 3rd level of the Unexpected Encounters quest. Now, he is not far from the 4th level. There were 3 rewards for the 3rd level, each worth 100 billion gold. Universal Panacea, 3 elixirs. They lie in wait in the wings in his hidden storage. Adrian thought this was a very timely reward. Thinking that he could no longer wait and waste time while the 4th level was waiting, the guy got up from the table and said that he would go to his room, and if there was anything important, they should write in the messenger. He threw his hand with glasses over his shoulder, warning that he would go play online games. Adrian asked the shocked people at the table if they had any objections. One of the officers sitting at the table turned to him and said that it turned out that what they were saying about him was true. The servant cautiously called the speaker by name, and Adrian looked at him and thought, the speaker was an officer of the advanced detachment. The Vanguard is a special squad equipped with magical armor and magical swords. They are the main driving force of any army, and they judge how strong the country is. This soldier, Advanced Detachment Officer Dalton, meanwhile, with a mocking smile, asked if he was sure that now was the time for games. After all, they will look at him as a nonentity, and not as a commander. He said that his reputation was already not so great, and now he brought a girl to the battle. And he's going to play games. Adrian, who was watching him, realized that he had decided to rebel against the representative of his lord. Dalton continued, saying that he could understand about the girl, and she was beautiful, but... Suddenly another man by his last name addressed him, interrupting his tirade, and in a stern voice he ordered him to watch his language, looking menacingly straight into his eyes. Dalton immediately closed his mouth in fear, saying nothing more. The man, meanwhile, turned to Adrian, apologizing for his subordinate because he exceeded his authority. The speaker was the second in command of the advance party, Bill I.M. He said they have a long road ahead of them and he understands that everyone needs entertainment. Adrian did not interrupt him, but at the same time he did not think that he was saying all this sincerely. He clearly doesn't like him either. But he doesn't care, because he's been used to this for a long time. Bill I.M. told him that he did not need to pay attention to the opinions of his subordinates, because he was the representative of His Grace the Viscount. Adrian did not answer, and leaving behind a tense atmosphere, he left with the words that when they arrived, they would write to him in the messenger. The dragon looked angrily at the closed flask with some liquid flying at him. As soon as it reached its target, it immediately exploded, creating a huge blast wave in front of Adrian and Arcia. It was a magical weapon, the tears of a salamander. An overly expensive bomb made from very valuable ingredients. Adrian remarked out loud that it was indeed expensive, one might even say overly expensive. But 3,000 damage without mana costs is expensive. The system suddenly beeped with a notification, which meant that his idea had worked. He reached level 60. Another notification appeared, saying that the main god Ariel had moved him to a secret room. Adrian and Arcia almost simultaneously stepped onto the white marble floor of the room on the next level. The guy immediately thought that this was the 4th level quest. In front of him was a monster, Pollock Emmers, whose health bar exceeded 32,000, and was completely full. He looked at them and said in a grim tone that his victims had finally appeared. The guy and the girl looked at this monster, not understanding at all how to deal with it. Perhaps level 4 needed to be cleared before they reached Western Command. A notification window about the conditions of the quest immediately appeared, which, however, did not differ in any way from the previous. Here are my victims, the head of the skeleton with a large amount of life. The guy started a quest. Unexpected Encounters level 3 requirement from level 80 is fulfilled. Kill the half-lich Immersa. Reward: open the 5th floor of the magic tower of Manuglia Lucas. Here's the task I received. Liches are strong monsters and serious opponents. And this one seemed slow and stupid. The girl activated the power of a spear made of ice stone. He touched it, not even waiting for us to prepare. Lord. The girl was worried. Arcia didn't make it. I have to dodge. The skeleton laughed. He was a glutton for the sound of broken bones and torn flesh. The guy was lying on the floor, wounded, thinking he should have dodged. It hurt him. His thoughts were confused. The laughter of the skeleton irritated the guy. Something familiar was heard in the laughter of the skeleton. The bony one says stay put, and a huge fireball flies at the guy. The girl's shield blocks the blow and they attack the skeleton. He did not expect such a sudden attack on him. He was in shock. The girl blocked the blow, and the guy hit him with a fiery blow right in the face, humiliating the skeleton. The guy punished the girl not to let him touch her. She understood him well and promised to be careful. The best way to defeat Lich is to hit him with a blessed weapon without stopping. Using his enchanted weapon with a blessing effect, they punished the ugly skeleton, who was puzzled. Asking the guys why they were fighting with a magic stick, he decided not to give up and activated a wall of fire. He put a skeleton between them and did not expect to get hit in the face. How did this freak break through fire, thought skeleton. The guy hit him and shouted die. The freak, similar to Cedric, got what he deserved. Level 4 of the Unexpected Encounters quest is completed. They say that during a fight, due to an adrenaline rush, you don't feel pain. But as soon as everything is over, here is the translation of the text you provided. Companion, independently opening the inventory of its owner. She is really special. Thank you. I feel much better. You have fulfilled the conditions for opening the next floor of the tower. The 5th floor of the Magic Tower of Manchila Lucas is now open to you. You have been moved to the 5th floor of the Magic Tower of Manuzla Lucas. Let's take a look at my rewards. You have received 500 billion loot. Enter the account you want to receive the amount on. You have received all-seeing eyes. It's like ordinary glasses, but they can't be ordinary, because these are from Manuel Lucas. Open description. All-round goggles allow you to analyze, investigate objects, have the properties of clairvoyance and enhanced vision, allow you to see the purpose of an item, its creatures, as well as its stats and purpose. Are a lie detector, allow you to see through obstacles. Possess magnifying powers, allowing you to see for miles. These goggles will help me recognize enemies and friends. It's an indispensable item for a distrustful type like me. Quest completed. Creation of the 4th circle is underway. Western Command. Second son, Viscount. I thought the bigger brother was coming. Yes, I think it's his 30-year-old Cedric. He's been a genius since he was a boy and had great promise. It's not Cedric, it's the younger one. I heard that after the poisoning, he became a fool. Yes, I'm the same brother who was poisoned. But I can see you're no fool at all, Your Grace. Rumors are just rumors. Pleased to meet you. I'm Viscount Evans, Chief of Staff, Western Force. I'm Viscount Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff. It's an honor to meet you. Let's see how many troops you've brought. 5 officers of the advance party and 50 knights. Yes, 5 advance officers, 50 knights and 1,000 infantry. Infantry doesn't have to be counted. The advance squad officers will decide the outcome of this war. An elite force armed with magical artifacts. Only a mage of at least 7th circle can deal with a forward squad officer. Unfortunately, he's correct. I understand it was Archduke Lucas who introduced the advanced squad officers into military practice. Your men are integrated into the army as the 2nd Independent Brigade, part of the 3rd Division. Your brigade commander is Count Otis. I believe Earl Otis is the Great Lord of the East. You are now the 2nd Independent Brigade. I hope you won't get in my way too much. To be continued. Thank you for watching our manga video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos. We strive to make videos about the most interesting manga and hope they will be useful for you also. If you have any requests or suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. We always welcome feedback from our viewers.